3 months ago, Jared Langston, CEO of Langston Roastery Group, was sitting in a 21st floor conference room where thick financial reports spoke of growing revenue, profits, and the market share of craft coffee in the American Northwest. But on that very day, he received a short message from his assistant. Harvest and Hearth, location number 4, received 7 more one-star reviews in 3 days. The service situation needs to be reviewed. He froze. That wasn't just one of 9 branches. It was the first shop his father had built with his own hands, where he had meticulously made every cappuccino with a handwritten slogan on the wall: "We don't sell coffee, we share joy." Now, that place was being labeled with cold coffee, terrible staff, and the worst of all, a cold atmosphere, as if you're bothering them by ordering. Jared told no one. Instead, he shaved his beard, put on a baseball cap, a pair of round-framed glasses, and an old hoodie. Posing as a student looking for a part-time job, he secretly submitted an application and was hired as a part-time dishwasher. No one at that branch knew his face, because ever since his father passed away, Jared had only worked at the main office. That Saturday morning, a light rain was falling in Portland. Jared walked down the familiar street, looking through the glass window, where there once used to be a long line of customers on weekends. Now there were only a few scattered people, their faces scowling, a couple shaking their heads as they walked out. There was no trace left of the coffee shop that was once an icon, only the smell of burnt espresso and music that was too loud for the dreary morning. Jared walked inside. The first person he saw was a young woman holding a small child, fumbling to order, while the platinum-blonde female barista was more focused on her nails than the customer. He stood behind her, observing in silence. When it was his turn, Jared just ordered a black coffee. Not a single smile, not a single reply, just a hand held out, waiting for money, and a paper cup placed carelessly on the counter. He took the cup of coffee, the very thing that was supposed to be the soul of the entire brand, and walked to a corner at the back of the shop, near the door to the employee break room. And then, it was right there that Jared heard something that sent a colder chill down his spine than the lukewarm coffee. "If one more person asks for non-fat milk, I swear I'll spit in their cup. Yesterday some guy complained the coffee was weak. I told him, then don't order drip at a real coffee shop. The new girl. Cut her hours. I told Miles straight up, if she's that slow, get her off the morning shift for good." Jared sat frozen. Those mocking voices belonged to the 2 employees standing right behind the counter, 1 male, 1 female. They had just served him a few minutes ago. At that moment, Jared knew this wasn't just a service problem, it was a rot from within. He left the shop without a word, no reaction, no orders, no firings. There was only the tapping of his fingers on the steering wheel of his car parked in the rain, and a short phone call. "Lee, send me the work schedule for branch number 4. I need to know the next shift for the new employee named Nina Carter." Jared couldn't save his father, but maybe he could still save something else. The honor, the soul, and the people being stifled in silence. 6:23 a.m. Jared stood pressed against the back entrance of Harvest and Hearth Cafe, the hood of his sweatshirt pulled low, hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the cold, mist-covered parking lot. He had been sitting in his car since 5:45, rereading the work schedule and checking the name Nina Carter on the opening shift today, along with Logan and Mira, the two people whose voices he couldn't forget from yesterday morning. An old Toyota pulled up, its headlights flashing once before the engine cut out. A young woman got out, pulling her beanie down tightly over her ears, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She paused at the back door for a few seconds, as if steeling herself, then inserted the key. Jared waited until the door was slightly ajar before quickly following her. "Oh, I thought I locked it." She turned, stopping short. "It's okay. I was right behind you. I'm Calb, the new guy for today," Jared said, his voice low and genuine. He held out his hand. The girl hesitated for a second, then shook it. Nina. The handshake was uncertain, but not shaky, like someone used to being under pressure. First time she asked, as she led him through a narrow hallway to the break room. "Yeah. Hope I don't ruin everyone's morning." Nina let out a soft laugh, not mocking but tinged with a shared understanding. "If you show up on time, you've already won half the battle. The morning shifts here, they aren't very pleasant." The break room was tiny, the light pale, 2 dented metal lockers, a folding table covered in coffee stains, and a half-empty donut box. Nina took off her coat, tied back her hair, and put on an apron. Jared did the same. He noticed the way she moved, quick, concise, but not relaxed, as if she was trying her best not to be criticized by anyone. "You'll probably be on dishwashing, cleaning, and restocking. New people usually start there," Nina said, without turning to look at him. "That's fine. Do you like working here?" She paused for a few beats. "It's okay. I need this job for tuition, so I try my best." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door swung open. Logan, the tall, thin guy from yesterday, walked in, apron in hand, a Bluetooth earbud still in his ear. "Early again. Nina," he drawled, not looking at her. His gaze then shifted to Jared. "Who's this, the new guy?" "His name's Calb." "First shift," Nina answered, like a memorized reflex. Logan rolled his eyes, looking Jared up and down with a smirk. "Corporate keeps sending people over. No idea why. We have enough staff." Jared didn't respond, just a slight nod, probably here to learn. Logan mumbled something and turned away. Jared leaned down, whispering to Nina. "Is he always like that?" Nina forced a smile, not because it was funny, but because she was used to it. "Just keep your head down and do your part. You'll be fine." The two of them walked out to the main counter. The shop was still dark, with only the sound of the grinder starting up and the coffee machine warming. Mira, the platinum blonde girl from yesterday, was fiddling with the espresso machine, one earbud in, tapping on her phone with her other hand. "Good morning," Nina said. No response, only the clacking sound of the bean grinder being adjusted. Mira lifted her eyes, glancing past them as if they were a flyer. Jared stepped into the dishwashing area. He washed the stainless steel milk pitchers still caked with last night's foam. The sink was tilted, the corner of the cleaning bin was broken, and chemicals were stored haphazardly. A complete mess. No one had cleaned it. No one cared. On the other side, Nina was checking the pastries, arranging cups in order, and wiping down the counter. Alone. With no help. But she didn't complain. She just worked. Quietly. Meticulously. As if trying to keep herself from being swallowed whole. Jared looked at her, then turned back to the sink. A question formed in his mind. Unsaid. How many good people have been buried in silence, just because no one bothered to see them for who they really are? 7:15 a.m. The front door of Harvest and Hearth Cafe swung open for the first time. The drizzle outside hadn't stopped, and customers began to flood in, from office workers to young mothers with babies, all searching for what Jared's father used to call a decent start to the day. But what they received was something very different. A woman walked up to the counter, her coat still dripping, her eyes sharp as she looked at the drink in front of her. "I said no whipped cream. Didn't you hear me?" Nina flinched and stepped back, about to apologize when Logan rushed over from behind. Without hearing the full story, he snatched the cup, dumped it straight into the sink, his voice as cold as ice. "Make it again. She's new, still learning." The customer frowned, looking at Nina as if she had just set the kitchen on fire. Nina lowered her head, mumbling, offering no defense. Her hands trembled as she shook the milk pitcher. Jared stood a few feet away, his stomach churning as if he were the one being scolded. He walked over, speaking softly. "Are you okay?" Nina nodded, her eyes welling with tears, but her lips remained pressed tightly together. "I just don't want my shift cut." Jared swallowed his words. Here, people didn't need motivation. They just needed to not be removed from the schedule. The shop was now full of customers, the sound of orders being called, receipt printers whirring, and the coffee grinder all blended together. Jared returned to the sink, his hands submerged in warm water. But his eyes never left Nina. She was struggling to hold her own in a cold, unforgiving machine. Mira made drinks as if she were punishing the customers. No protective sleeve for a hot cup. Names written incorrectly. A latte turned into a cappuccino. A cappuccino as thin as fresh milk. I ordered a cappuccino, an older man asked upon receiving his cup. "That is a cappuccino," Mira replied, not looking up. "It's just milk and foam." "I don't think you understand the recipe," she muttered. Turning her back, the customer walked away, drink still in hand. Logan glanced over, shrugging. "Next time, tell them it's a dry latte. They don't know anything." Mira scoffed. Nina didn't laugh. Jared clenched the handle of the stainless steel pitcher in his hand. He understood. This wasn't just a work ethic. It was a life attitude. It was contempt that had become a habit. A little later, Jared approached Nina, who was standing at the payment counter. "Do you need to take a break?" She shook her head. "It's fine. I'm okay." Your hands are still shaking." She swallowed hard, then said quietly, "I can't let anyone think I'm weak. Not now. I need this job." Jared nodded, but in his eyes there was nothing weak about Nina, only a resilience that was being forced into silence. "Calb, go empty the mop water, please," Logan shouted from the brewing station. Jared looked up. "Where's the mop sink?" "There isn't one," Mira sneered. "Dump it out back. Everyone does." Jared slowly carried the bucket of water, a sour smell rising from it. Behind the shop, he saw 3 old water stains dried on the ground, evidence of a disregard for regulations, repeated over and over. When he came back inside, Logan was leaning against the coffee machine, scrolling on his phone. Mira was pouring syrup while browsing Instagram, and Nina was hunched over, apologizing to a customer for an order that was nearly 15 minutes late. Jared walked past her, back to the dishwashing area. But his hands no longer wanted to scrub pitchers. His heart was breaking into questions. Father built this empire because he believed in people. So, what about me? When did I lose that belief? And worse, was he letting the very people worth believing in, like Nina, be left behind? The Portland evening was still gloomy, the streetlights seeming to flicker in the misty rain. Nina Carter walked slowly through the side door of the community library, her backpack slung to one side, her hand tightly gripping the strap of her jacket. She didn't understand why Calb, the new guy from work today, had messaged her to meet privately. But there was something in his eyes when he stood behind the dishwashing counter, when he asked if her hands were shaking, that made it impossible for her to refuse. He was already sitting at a table near the window. In front of him were 2 hot paper cups of tea steaming and a thin manila envelope. "Hi," Nina said, her voice hesitant but not cold. "You wanted to talk?" Jared stood up, pulling out a chair for her. "Thanks for coming. I hope you like chamomile tea." "I took a guess." Nina sat down, her hands instinctively wrapped around the teacup, the way one might cling to warmth after a very long day. "I want to know what's going on." Jared looked at her, his gaze no longer evasive. "My name isn't Calb, it's Jared." Jared Langston. Silence. The library space seemed to freeze over. Nina blinked, then laughed, but not a happy laugh. "Wait a minute. Jared Langston, as in Langston Roastery." "Yes." He nodded slightly. "The shop you work at is part of my family's company. You're the CEO." Her voice slowed. "You were washing dishes." He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, letting her piece together all the falling fragments. "I came because something was wrong, and I couldn't see it from the office." Nina leaned back in her chair, her face contorting with a mix of emotions. So today was an act? No. It was the only way for me to understand what was really happening to the shop, and to you. She was silent for a long time. "I wasn't trying to drag anyone into my problems." She finally said, "I was just trying to survive." "Why do you call it surviving?" Nina let out a dry, joyless laugh. "Because you don't understand. They don't train me. They give me tasks, then punish me. They say I'm slow, but no one guides me. They tell me to learn by watching them do things wrong." Jared leaned forward, pulling a stack of papers from the envelope, printouts of the work schedule for the last 4 weeks. "The morning shift is understaffed, but no one requested more coverage. Logan makes the schedule himself, and Miles, the regional manager, approves it without even looking." Nina looked at the paper. Her eyes stopped on her name, repeated over and over on the early opening shifts. "Alone. I thought Mira signed up for double shifts. Everyone thinks she's a hard worker. She's not. She was pushed into it, just like you were pushed into silence." Nina slumped into her chair, her hands cupping the tea. For the first time, she felt heard, truly heard, not because someone needed a report, but because they cared. "I was going to quit last week," she whispered, "but tuition is due. I need the paycheck." "You're not in the wrong, Nina. You're trying to hold on to what's right in a broken system." She looked up at him. "So what now? Am I fired?" He shook his head. "The opposite. I need you." She froze. "I'm closing the branch for 3 days, cleaning it out, retraining. Whoever wants to stay will have to learn from scratch. Whoever doesn't can leave." Nina's eyes widened. You're really going to do that? And if you agree, I want you to be the one to lead it." What she almost exclaimed, not as a manager, but as the person who holds the soul of the morning shift. "You will have a voice in hiring, scheduling, and training." Nina looked down at her tea, her hand trembling slightly. "Why me?" Jared smiled, not the smile of a boss, but of someone who had just found a flicker of light in a dark wall. "Because you were the only one who didn't give up. Because you still thanked customers, even when you didn't get a single thank you in return." A long breath. Nina nodded slightly, very slightly, but it was firm. "So, what time tomorrow? 7 a.m. I'll be there. You're not alone anymore." She stood up, gripping her backpack strap, the teacup still in her hand. "Thank you for seeing me." Jared didn't reply. He just watched her leave, lighter, but not weaker. For the first time since his father's death, he felt that trust could be rebuilt, not from reports, but from the hearts of the people behind the counter. 6:50 a.m. Inside Harvest and Hearth Cafe. There were no customers, no sound of grinders, only the smell of bleach, the clatter of toolboxes being moved, and a strange silence that filled the space. The sign hanging on the door read, "Temporarily closed for internal training." A temporary crew was replacing the pastry case curtains, cleaning the HVAC system, and swapping out all the old pastry trays. The old, mouldy, bent and rusted items were cleared out, thrown into a disposal truck out back. In one corner of the counter, Nina had her hair tied up high, holding a clipboard and checking a supply list. No one was giving orders. No one was hovering over her. But everything was flowing. Jared stood inside, wearing a neat button-down shirt, a grey sports coat, and his hair was now cut short and tidy. His eyes followed Nina's every move, without interfering. He didn't need to. She was handling it as if she were born to keep this shop standing. "The oat milk hasn't arrived," Nina reported. "I've marked it on the delivery sheet. I also told the temp lead to coordinate with Midtown." "Good work." Jared nodded. "You can lead the first orientation session if you want." She hesitated for a beat. "Depends on who shows up." 7:30 a.m. The door opened. Mira walked in, wearing a black jacket, her hair in its usual high bun, but her face no longer held its indifferent expression. She stopped short as soon as she saw what was happening. Toolboxes, new procedure charts, brighter lighting, staff with unfamiliar name tags, and in the middle of the shop, Jared, standing tall with another clipboard. Mira's eyes widened. She stammered, Wait, you're the owner." Jared walked over, nodding politely. "Mira. Right, I remember you from the first day I came." Mira looked around as if searching for a hidden camera. No one said anything. No one gave us a heads up. No one needed to. He replied softly, "We're starting over. From the beginning. All of us." She narrowed her eyes. "So, what does that mean?" "You'll still be paid for today. But if you want to continue working here, you'll have to relearn the procedures from scratch, just like everyone else." Mira clutched her bag strap. "What if I refuse? No one is being forced. But if you want to leave, well, the door is right there." A moment of silence. She finally walked towards the break room, but without a defiant attitude. She was just trying to process what had actually just happened. 7:45 a.m. The door opened again. Logan, still in the same old hoodie from yesterday, still the same cocky walk, but as soon as he stepped inside, his eyes immediately locked onto Nina, and then Jared. He stopped, his gaze turning sharp. "What is this?" Jared didn't flinch. He walked towards him, his voice calm to the point of being cold. "This is a restructuring program, retraining, a second chance for those who want to start over." Logan scoffed. "Who are you to be giving orders like that, Jared Langston, the owner of this chain?" Logan's face hardened. Did she tell you?" He pointed a finger straight at Nina. She didn't waver. "I didn't have to tell him anything," Nina said, her eyes looking straight ahead. "You did enough on your own." Jared stood between them, like a shield. "I've seen the shift logs, the cleaning logs, and the internal reports. You cut shifts, you shifted blame, and you committed serious health code violations. You weren't misunderstood, you were caught." Logan gritted his teeth. "So I'm fired." Jared nodded. "You'll be paid for your last 2 weeks. After that, terminated." A pause. Then Logan let out a dry laugh, not a real laugh, just helplessness mixed with bitterness. "Can't believe you'd turn your back on the guy who kept this place running, all for some naive college kid." Jared replied, without raising his voice, "No one keeps a place running by pushing other people down. And no one has authority without responsibility. Logan turned on his heel. No one stopped him. The door closed behind him, echoing a necessary end. Inside, the air felt lighter, not because someone was gone, but because the heaviest thing had been removed: fear. 9:00 a.m. A soft sunlight shone through the front window of the shop, casting light on the tile floor that had been polished so well it reflected a person's silhouette. The 3 remaining employees of Harvest and Hearth, Mira, a college student named Theo, and another part-time worker, were standing in a line at the bar. In front of them was Nina Carter, the person who just a week ago had her hours cut, was assigned menial tasks, and blamed for everything, was now holding a training guide and beginning the introduction to the training program. She stood up straight, her hands no longer shaking. Her apron was neat, her hair tied up high. But it was her eyes, the thing Jared had noticed from the very beginning, that had changed. No longer bewildered, no longer evasive, only clarity and a very real touch of courage. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice not loud but clear. "I know many of you might find it strange that I'm the one standing here. Believe me, I used to think so too." Jared leaned in a corner of the shop, not intervening. He let Nina do it her way. "I used to be yelled at for making mistakes, looked at with contempt just because I wasn't familiar with the job, and no one guided me, except with criticism. Today, I don't want that to happen to anyone here." She held up the cleaning guide, carefully placing it on the counter. "We'll start with the brewing station. Everyone thinks cleaning is just about wiping things down, but it's actually how we show respect for the space and respect for our customers." Mira slowly stepped forward. She said nothing, only listened. Her once sharp, cold eyes were now lowered, occasionally glancing at Nina as if to ask, "Do you really think you can do this?" Nina didn't avoid that gaze. "Mira, could you help me explain the diagram for the grinder? I know you've operated it for months." Mira was a little surprised. A flash of embarrassment crossed her face. But after a few seconds, she nodded, slowly pointing out each part. For the first time, Mira spoke not to show off, but to share. At a table in the back, Theo, a quiet college student who had only ever been assigned dishwashing and mopping floors, raised his hand. "I see the note for brewing cold brew isn't quite right. We could add a steeping time of 16 hours, not 12 if we want it stronger." Nina smiled. "That's a good idea. I'll adjust it." Jared tilted his head slightly, watching. That young man, the one no one paid attention to, had just stepped out of his own shadow. And more importantly, Nina didn't let power cloud her ability to listen. She didn't turn herself into another version of Logan. She led with experience, with the very times she had been overpowered. In the middle of the training, there was a moment Jared would never forget. A new employee spilled milk on the tabletop. Out of reflex, Theo glanced towards Nina, afraid of being scolded. But Nina just pulled out a cloth, handed it to him and said, "Next time, don't overpour. But making a mistake doesn't make you a lesser person. Just fix it. That's enough." At that moment, Mira watched Nina for a long time. Then she walked to the sink and silently washed each cup cleanly, no longer lazy like before. When the training session ended, Jared walked over slowly. He didn't need to clap, didn't need to praise. He just said, "You chose to lead, not to control. That's the difference we need." Nina exhaled, a long breath as if releasing an unnamed pressure. "I don't know if I'm doing it right." "You are." He nodded, "Not because you're perfect, but because you started by listening." A day ago, Nina was the new employee considered nothing more than a burden. Today, she made an entire system, one that once seemed impossible to change, start listening to each other again. That afternoon, the training continued as planned. Jared retreated to the background, giving the entire space to Nina and the new team, like a silent test for the person he trusted. But it didn't take long for Nina's first real test to arrive. A regular customer, Mr. Russell, in his 60s, who often stopped by for a flat white every afternoon, pushed open the door. A confused look on his face when he saw the temporarily closed for training sign was still up. He tapped lightly on the glass. Mira looked at Jared, waiting for an order, but it was Nina who walked over, gently opening the door. "Hello, sir. We're conducting internal training today. The shop will officially reopen tomorrow morning." Mr. Russell frowned. "But I walked several blocks just to have a flat white like I do every day." "I understand," Nina said, her voice soft but not weak. "If you don't mind waiting a few minutes, I can make one just for you, but according to our new procedure." She turned to look at Jared, as if seeking confirmation. He just gave a slight nod. Mira stood up, looking annoyed. "You didn't say we were serving customers today." Jared kept his voice neutral. "A real-world situation is always the final exam." Nina went to the brewing station. Her hands were steadier than the day before, her movements no longer hesitant. She made Mr. Russell a flat white according to the new standard, then placed it on a tray with a small, handwritten note. "Thank you for coming back. We look forward to seeing you at a better version of ourselves." Mr. Russell took a sip, raising his eyebrows. "This is much better today." "Is it because of the new procedure?" "Yes, sir. It's because everyone listened and we fixed every little detail together." When he left, he didn't just nod at Nina. He also nodded at Mira and at Jared in the back. A very small step. But it was the first step in restoring the community's trust, which had been lost. Around 4 p.m., just as everything was running smoothly, an old wind returned. Miles, the regional manager, walked in unannounced. His blazer was wrinkled, his tie crooked, his face tired. He saw Jared, and his demeanor instantly changed. "Mr. Langston, I thought you were at the main office." Jared crossed his arms. "And I thought you read reports before approving work schedules." Miles averted his eyes. "I was busy coordinating multiple regions." Logan said everything was fine. "Logan no longer works here." Jared cut in. "And Nina, the person whose hours he used to cut, is now in charge of retraining the entire staff." Miles's gaze shifted to Nina, who was still making notes on the shift board. Her previously. That look would have made Nina shrink, but not today. She stepped forward. I have the new shift rotation chart, a detailed report on everyone's hours, and a proposal to improve break times between long shifts. Would you like to see it? Miles was flustered. He took the stack of papers and flipped through them. A few seconds passed. He turned to Jared, as if looking for an escape. Is she for real? Jared smiled, not mockingly, just a confirmation that couldn't be denied. She did what your system missed. She listened, and she led with kindness. Miles was silent. Then he gave a slight nod, for the first time since he had walked in. I'll update the entire region, from procedures to personnel in charge. If you need my approval for additional staff support or expanded training, just send it over. Nina said nothing, but her eyes, which once would have been downcast before someone like Miles, now dared to look straight at him. When Miles left, Jared walked over to Nina. You just handled two situations that many seasoned managers might not have. I was just keeping things fair. No, you preserve value, and value is much rarer than fairness. Nina gave a small laugh. I don't think I have the strength to do this long term. That's okay. The important thing is that you started, and you took the right step. The training was nearing its end. The late afternoon sun slanted through the wooden blinds, casting long shadows from the bar onto the spotlessly clean floor. Nina stood in front of the shift board, checking the time slots one last time. She lightly crossed out Logan's name, still lingering on the Monday morning shift, and replaced it with a yellow blank box, temporarily open. Behind her, Jared approached, a thin envelope in his hand. I have something for you. Nina turned, frowning. What is it? He placed the envelope on the counter between them. Inside was a description of a new job title, official from the Langston Roastery system, with her name printed right at the top. Shift supervisor, Nina Carter. It's no longer temporary. This is official. With access to the scheduling system, attendance at weekly meetings with the regional supervisor, and the authority to propose new hires for the first 90 days. She stood frozen. Her hand trembled slightly as it touched the corner of the paper. I thought I was just temporarily in charge during the training. You surpassed that yesterday. After a moment, she looked up, her voice small but full of apprehension. Are you sure I've never done anything like this? I'm just a college student who used to get scolded for pouring milk too slowly. And because you were scolded like that, you'll never scold someone else the wrong way. He continued slowly. Being a leader doesn't mean being good at everything. It means knowing how to stand firm when others want to retreat. You've done that. She smiled faintly, but her eyes still revealed a hint of vague worry. Jared noticed it, and he knew. Sometimes the hardest thing is believing you deserve it. Late in the afternoon, after everyone had left to rest, Nina sat alone, reviewing her notes. Jared had left for an emergency meeting with the operations department. The atmosphere settled, until the door swung open. A young woman, about 19, walked in with a thin folder in her hand. Her shirt was wrinkled, her hair damp from the rain, her eyes a mix of exhaustion. Nina stood up, a bit surprised. "Can I help you?" The girl hesitated. "I saw the part-time job posting. I'm not sure if I still have a chance." Nina paused for a second. She hadn't expected anyone to just walk in today. She had also never interviewed anyone before. "What's your name, Riley?" "Do you have any experience? I worked at a bakery for a summer, but I quit because my mum got sick." Nina looked at Riley, her rain-dampened hair, her hand holding the folder trembling slightly. Suddenly, she remembered herself 3 weeks ago, also trembling, also needing a job, also not being asked anything more, only being judged. She took the folder, read a few lines, then she quietly set it down. "Tomorrow, 6:45 a.m. If you're on time, wearing closed-toe shoes, you have a trial shift." Riley's eyes widened. "Really? I don't need an interview." Nina smiled faintly. "We'll let the work speak for itself." Riley mumbled her thanks, then left, her face a mixture of radiance and anxiety. When the door closed, Nina sat down, staring at the nameplate on the table. She had just hired someone, with her own hands, without asking for an opinion, without needing to ask anyone. A strange feeling washed over her, not quite joy, more like weight. She thought about the responsibility, about what would happen if Riley got bullied, if the shop started to slide back, if she herself wasn't good enough. Was I giving hope too soon? Can I do this for the long run, what Jared believes in? She looked down at her hands, still stained with ink from the training session. And then, she whispered, as if reminding herself, "I'm not sure I'll be perfect, but I'm sure I'll be different." On the corner of the wall, her new nameplate was being mounted, waiting for tomorrow morning. 6:20 a.m. the next day. The Portland sky was a hazy grey, the first rays of sun still caught in a misty drizzle. But inside Harvest and Hearth Cafe, the lights were bright, the air filled with the smell of fresh pastries and warm coffee. Nina stood at the counter, clipboard in hand. Her apron was crisp. Her name was now printed on the first line of the shift schedule, Nina Carter, shift supervisor. She didn't need Jared to be there, not because he wasn't important, but because this morning she was ready to do this alone. To her left, Theo was checking the pastry trays. Mira was prepping the grinder, plugging it in, and drying the steam wand without any of her previous complaints. They didn't talk much, but their eyes were different. No longer careless, no longer evasive, only a quiet unity. 6:40 a.m. The door swung open. Riley appeared. The young woman from yesterday, her hair still slightly damp, her eyes hesitant but alert. "I'm on time," Riley said, her voice a bit hoarse from the cold. Nina nodded, handing her an apron and giving her a quick rundown of the procedures. "You'll observe for 30 minutes. Then you'll try working in the cleaning area. No one is going to yell at you, but no one is going to do your work for you either." Riley nodded, her eyes grateful. 7. a.m. The temporarily closed for training sign was taken down. The front door opened. Harvest and Hearth was officially back. The first customer walked in. It was Mr. Russell, with his grey worn beanie and a look of skepticism. Nina walked over. A flat white, same as always. Right, sir. He chuckled. Well, I hope no one skimps on the foam today. No, it's a different team today, she said. Not just new staff, but a new spirit. Nina made the flat white with her own hands. No shaking, no rushing. She personally cleared a ceramic cup, placed it on the correct tray, and wrote the correct name. When Mr. Russell took the cup, he said only one thing. It's been a long time since I've seen someone make coffee with heart. More customers started to come in. The familiar scene returned, the sound of machines, the chime of the bell, a constant stream of orders. But this time, Jared stood outside watching, not to control, but to witness. Nina wasn't flustered at all. She reminded Theo to change a tray before the rush hour. She adjusted the temperature of the milk steamer when she noticed it was running unusually hot. And especially when Mira almost forgot to wear gloves while serving a pastry. Nina just gently touched her shoulder. No scolding, no shaming. Just a reminder that was enough to make Mira silently nod. 9:00 a.m. The line of customers hadn't thinned. Jared walked inside, greeted a few people, and then stood in front of the shift schedule. He saw Riley's name, marked this morning with a green check mark. At the bottom, Nina had added a handwritten note. Recommendation: let Riley try as a barista assistant after 1 week if she shows good progress. He nodded slightly. Nina wasn't just keeping the shop running. She was learning to see the potential in others, just as he had once seen in her. 10:00 a.m. Nina dried her hands after a continuous round of brewing, lifting her head to look around. The shop was full. No one was scowling. No one was leaving because of a wrong order. There were no more exhausted sighs, no more grumbling behind the counter, only light laughter, the rhythmic hum of the grinder, and the satisfied looks on customers' faces as they left with a truly warm cup of coffee. Jared approached. "How's it going?" "Good," Nina breathed. "I'm tired. But it's the kind of tired that makes me want to come back tomorrow." "That's the right feeling," Jared said. "The shop doesn't need the best person. It needs the kindest person who is still willing to stick around." Nina didn't reply. She just looked out the door, where the morning light was stretching across the sidewalk, and smiled. 11:45 a.m. The early morning rain had cleared, and Harvest and Hearth Cafe was experiencing a busier lunch rush than anyone had expected. The seats by the window were all taken, the sound of orders being called mixed with gentle laughter. There was no tension, only a warm energy flowing through the shop. Nina stood by the register, adjusting the receipt printer. Mira was guiding Riley on how to control the milk flow while frothing. Jared sat in the back, editing a new procedural document for other branches based on the model Nina had just implemented. And then the door opened. A familiar figure walked in, a faded grey hoodie, old sneakers, a quiet but stubborn gait. Logan. No one cried out. There were no dramatic movie-like stares. There was only a slight hesitation in Nina's hand as she was typing in a new order. She looked up, her eyes meeting Logan's for just a second. He walked to the counter, not ordering, not looking for a seat. He just placed a folded letter on the countertop, right in front of Nina. "I'm not here to cause trouble, just wanted to leave this. Whether you keep it or tear it up is up to you." He spoke quietly enough for only her to hear, but clearly enough that anyone nearby wouldn't misunderstand. Then he turned and left, not a single glance towards Jared. No explanation, no bragging, no blaming, just a different Logan, quiet, out of the wind, and no longer in charge. The door closed. No one said anything. Mira stopped what she was doing. Riley looked around, confused about what had just happened. Nina touched the letter. Her hand trembled slightly, as if she didn't know whether to open it or put it away. Finally, she opened it. A single, handwritten page. Not long. The writing was a bit messy. Just a few lines. I thought I was carrying the whole shop. But really, I was just carrying my own insecurity. I used to see control as power. But when I lost it, I felt lighter. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you do what I couldn't. Logan. Nina folded it back up, said nothing, didn't hand it to Jared, didn't throw it in the trash. She just quietly tucked it into the drawer under the cash register, like a memory that was once a thorn, now a lesson. She looked over at Mira, unexpectedly. Mira said softly, "Maybe. Now you understand why I used to stay silent." Nina didn't react with anger. She just said, "I understand. But we're not staying silent anymore." 12:30 p.m. An elderly customer, returning for the first time in months, stood staring at the menu for a long time. Mira walked over, smiling. "Can I help you with anything, sir?" "Oh, I used to get the iced coffee with milk, but it was a bit watery before." "Not anymore," she replied. "We've changed." The customer smiled. "A good change. A little better every day," she said. And that very sentence made Jared look up, because it didn't come from a training manual, not from any pressure, but from real change, spreading like sunshine after the rain. Jared stood up and walked toward Nina. "You just handled a real day, no longer an internship, no longer a test." She smiled, softly, and no longer avoiding things. He looked at the shift schedule, then at her calm eyes. "Tomorrow, you'll be the one to open the shop, without anyone standing next to you." "I know." She nodded. "But I'll still call if something feels off." He nodded, his expression softening. "Good. Good people don't need to control everything. They just need to not ignore things that deviate from their values." The next morning, the atmosphere inside Harvest and Hearth was warmer than the sunlight outside the window. The espresso machine hummed steadily. The pastry case smelled of baked butter, and on the white-painted wooden wall, a new line of text had just been added. "Respect isn't an extra, it's the baseline." Nina was sitting at the counter, checking the newly updated shift schedule from the central system. Riley now had a green box on next week's schedule. Barista assistant trial phase. Mira was now in charge of guiding the machine cleaning after each shift. And Theo had just proposed an idea for a QR code menu, something he never would have dared to say before. Nothing was perfect, but everyone was moving towards something better. 8:05 a.m. The door opened. A young woman walked in, a small figure in a beige shirt, clutching a folder. Her eyes were visibly tense, as if she were walking into an exam room. She stood awkwardly for a moment, looking around. Her eyes met Nina's, without anyone needing to prompt her, without a signal from Jared. Nina stood up first. She walked over, offering a gentle smile, the exact kind of smile she had once wished someone had given her when she first started working here. "Hi, are you here for a job?" The girl nodded. "Yes, I saw the posting online. I brought my resume." Nina took it, but didn't open it right away. She just gently pulled out a chair, inviting the girl to sit. "What's your name?" "Harper." "Harper, do you have time to learn? Are you willing to listen? And do you mind washing dishes?" "Yes, as long as I don't get yelled at in front of customers." Nina laughed, not because it was funny, but because she understood that feeling all too well. "Here, you can make mistakes, but you will never be humiliated." The girl let out a breath of relief. "So, do I have a chance?" Nina nodded. "You already do. Your first trial shift is Monday, 6:45 a.m. I'll be the one training you directly." Harper smiled, her eyes lit up. Just like when Jared had said his first words to Nina, "I need you." 9:00 a.m. Jared returned. He stood behind the counter, observing Nina as she showed Harper how to properly clean the portafilter. No longer a girl struggling to survive. No longer the fear of making a mistake in her eyes. Only a woman who was now giving back what she once had to fight for herself: trust. Jared walked over, asking quietly. Good Nina turned, her eyes bright. "Better than I imagined." He looked around, saw Harper learning, Riley brewing, Theo managing inventory, Mira checking off the new checklist. "This is your team now, and I don't want to let them down." "Then you're exactly who this shop needs." They didn't need to say more, because it was all there in one very simple action. A person who was once abandoned, standing up to open the door for someone else. The circle was closed. That evening, Jared didn't go straight back to the office. He sat down at the corner table, the same spot where he had sat on his first day with a cold cup of coffee, listening to the bitter words from behind the break room door. Now, the coffee cup was in the same place, but the aroma was gentle. The heat was just right, and the voices from the counter were no longer sneers, but the quiet sounds of colleagues guiding one another. He looked out the glass window. People were still passing by. No one knew this place had almost collapsed because of the very people inside it. But it was also the place where one person, just a young woman, had chosen not to give up. When Nina walked to his table and placed a new internal evaluation form in front of him, with neat handwriting and clear bullet points, he looked up and smiled. ready to be a long-term manager yet. She laughed. I'm still learning, but this time I'm learning so I can teach others, not just to survive. Jared nodded. My father used to say, if you want to know if a coffee shop is strong or weak, don't look at the menu, don't look at the revenue, look at how the weakest person there is treated. Nina listened, then whispered, so, was I the weakest person? Maybe, Jared said, but not anymore. She smiled, the smile of someone who understood her own value without needing to prove it with words. The next day, Jared officially left branch number 4, handing over full operational control to Nina and her team. He left without any ceremony, without a formal meeting. He just left a short note in a message sent to all employees. Good coffee is one thing, but what makes people come back is how we make them feel when they walk through our door. A few weeks later, on the internal news board of Langston Roastery Group, there was a post with the headline, "The shop once rated the worst, now has the highest customer service score of the quarter." In the photo, Nina stood in the middle of her new team. Behind them was a white brick wall with a new slogan she had written herself, "We aren't perfect, but every day we choose to be kinder than we were yesterday." And that was the truest story a coffee shop could tell. Not a story about a boss in disguise, not a story about a dramatic firing, not a story about a spectacular promotion, but a story about how someone who was once looked down upon chose not to treat others the way she had been treated. The story of how kindness, no matter how small, can create the biggest change, not with power, not with a whip, but with the persistence of someone whose hands once trembled for fear of making a mistake, but whose heart never trembled when standing up for what was right. If you've ever walked into a place and felt small, remember the ones who were once the smallest are sometimes the ones who rewrite how the world should work. Because real change doesn't start with the powerful, it starts with those who dare to stay when everyone else has turned their back. If one kind person in the darkest of places can change the entire space, then imagine what would happen with 2 people, 3, or a whole team like that. Not everyone who starts at the top is trustworthy, and not everyone who starts at the bottom stays there forever. Sometimes, the only thing needed to change a system is one person who dares to say, "We deserve better."